Well, good afternoon. It's really a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Tom and the committee for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to speak. It's always a pleasure to come back to Cleveland. I know you find that hard to believe, but it is a pleasure to come back to Cleveland. I have, since being here, just listening to all the speakers and the presenters, um, it's very humbling to stand here. And as I was continuing to prepare and to pray, this verse came to mind. What then shall we say, brothers and sisters? When you come together, each of you has a hymn or a word of instruction, a revelation, a tongue or an interpretation. Everything must be done so that the church may be built up. It is my prayer this afternoon that what I share with you will indeed build up the church of Cleveland, of Columbus, Northeast Ohio, Central Ohio, unto all the nations of the world for his glory. So I know we have a lot of pastors here. So maybe if you would, as a pastor, restrain yourself. And let me ask this question of the rest of you. What was the first law pronounced in the Bible? Anybody? Don't all jump at once. Anybody? Be fruitful and multiply. Well, this is how you know I am not a theologian. I am an attorney, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and my wonderful husband is somewhere here. I think the law that was first spoken was in Genesis 1, because Genesis 1:1 tells us that in the beginning, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the earth. Formless, empty, and dark, but the Spirit hovered over the waters. And then God spoke. And what did he speak? He spoke laws. He spoke laws. He mandated that there would be light and there would be dark. He said there would be day and there would be night. There would be waters under the expanse and waters over the expanse. He spoke that there would be land and there would be seas. All that he spoke was law because it divided. And laws divide. Laws are boundaries. So whenever God sets a boundary, it is a law. If there is no division, guess what? There's no law. So God sets these boundaries into place. Apart from boundaries, there is darkness, there is formlessness, and there is a void. Without law, there is darkness, emptiness, and formlessness. Keep this definition in mind as we proceed. So, what's the purpose of human beings? Westminster Confession: to glorify God and enjoy him forever. What is the purpose of law? What is the purpose of law? It is to provide boundaries. The law serves so many purposes. 4 principal ones: establishing standards, maintaining order, resolving disputes, and protecting liberties and rights. How many times a day do you, as you're driving perhaps, take your foot off the accelerator because you see, not the sign, but usually the policeman, and you think, oops, I'm like 7 miles over the speed limit, right? How many times do you say to your children, don't run? It's a law. Don't go out in the street. It's a boundary. We have laws in this country starting from the time that we are toddlers until the day we are dead. We have so many laws, and most people in other countries cannot believe how many laws we have. We have rules and regulations to oversee just about everything. We don't always like these rules. But laws protect our general safety, and they ensure our rights as citizens. We have laws to help provide for our general safety. We have food safety laws. In fact, this always shocks me. And please do not take this in the wrong way. But how many of you know, do you ever say to your kids, we don't use the word hate, honey. We don't use that word hate. And yet we have to have a law about hate crimes. Like a law, like people need to be told it's not right to hate somebody. Apparently, because we don't have any boundaries. We don't have any boundaries anymore. Robert Heinlein, the famous writer, said, what would our society be like without laws? And Robert Heinlein said, and I quote, I am free, no matter what rules surround me. If I find them tolerable, I tolerate them. If I find them too obnoxious, I break them. I am free because I know that I alone am morally responsible for everything I do. I alone decide which laws are obnoxious and which ones are tolerable. Perhaps I should say, as I talk about being a lawyer, that sometimes one's career is not chosen by you. Sometimes your career chooses you. I did not want to study law. My parents, being good Asian parents, thought that they needed a lawyer in the family, and so I was the chosen one. But I found that I love the law. I love the words, I love the interpretation, I love the competition. I didn't always like the application, but I really learned to love the law. The thing is, someone always has to win and somebody always has to lose. And for a long time, I was never the one that lost, which was great. I love the way law impacts every aspect of our society. Good or bad, it does. From the nonprofit to the profit, from the individual to the organization, from Apple to the nonprofit around the corner. I love how law touches every aspect of our life, just like boundaries do. So I know the purpose of my life, the presumed purpose of the law, and I've chosen law as my career, and the question becomes, how do I do that? How do I practice law then? How does the practice of law intersect with the purpose of my life, which is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever? So after law school, I worked for a judge, then I worked for a law firm. I took a 2-year leave of absence to do missions work in Thailand. I come back, and that's actually when I met Tom Hare. And that was in the time of Operation Rescue. For all of you who are under 40, get out your little Google at your computer and say, what is Operation Rescue? But those of you who know Operation Rescue, raise a hand. How many of you did I defend? No. So it was a time when pro-life people would passively resist in front of the entrances and exits of abortion clinics. And it was my job to try and get them out. It was not my finest hour as an attorney. I will say that actually most of my clients who were with Operation Rescue actually did time in jail. Some of them didn't, by the grace of God. And some of them loved it so much the first time they did it 2, 3, and 4 times. The food was good. So after that, we had 4 children, and so I'd take some time away from the law. I raise our kids, and then I went to Heartbeat International, which is basically the world's largest network of life-affirming organizations. And I worked as their legal counsel, and I loved that. So everything I've done so far, whether it was litigation, corporate work, I loved all of it. But then I took some time off again, and I went into private practice. When I was in private practice, I had the opportunity to work as the counsel or the guardian ad litem for abused, neglected, and dependent children. And it opened my eyes in a way I cannot describe for you. I had a mother who's I had a client who was a young mom, maybe early 30s. She had 3 kids, and she decided one day that she had to take her youngest, the infant, to the urgent care. So she left the oldest one in charge of the younger one at home. And unfortunately, the oldest one was only 8. And she left him alone with the 4-year-old. Children are removed. It's my job now to get her reunited. That's the goal of the law, to reunite the family. And one day I said, look, I know you don't want to, but you've got to take these drug tests, the whiz quiz, we call it. And it's very difficult because they call you at the last minute. You've got 3 hours. You got to show up. You take the test. If you are positive for any kind of drug, you're done. She said, well, I'm not a drug addict. I said, I know you're not a drug addict, but you got to take the test. She said, well, I don't want to. I said, it's part of your case plan. She said, I don't effing care about my case plan. And I said, well, you need to care about your case plan, because if you don't care about your case plan, you're not going to get your kids back. And she said, right now, I don't effing care about my kids. Now, before we all go, that's one. That's one case out of about 250 to 400 that occur every day in Franklin County alone. Now you multiply that, church. Multiply that across every county in Ohio and then across every state. And we are talking about a huge phenomenon of pain. Pain. And so I thought, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. Now I have found my calling. Now this is really what I love. And so I did this day after day. And I had some cases that were tremendous. And some places when I did part of my home study, I couldn't sit down, honestly, because I didn't know what I was going to take back home with me. And I had some clients I had a woman she had 4 kids, and she had a job at McDonald's, and she was not even making $9 an hour. And the way it works is that every month your case gets called, and you have to show up, whether anything's going to happen or not. You show up, and then you wait for 3.5, 4 hours, and you just sit there until they call your case. And so this woman, every single month for 14 months, would pack up her kids, get them on the bus, rain or shine, take her day off from McDonald's. And do you think she got time off for that? No, she did not. And then she eventually lost her job. And every month she would show up, and it would get continued. This is our system. But you do get the chance to touch people's lives. And that was really rewarding, and I loved it. But one day, I walked into court, and the magistrate was annoyed. This magistrate was annoyed because she had been waiting 2 hours for this case to come forth, and I was the only attorney that was present. So why she was mad at me when I was the only one that was there, I'm not really sure, but she was really annoyed with me. And she kept telling me, you need to go out and get these attorneys. You need to do this. And I'm like, Your Honor, I'm doing what I can. I'm here. My client's here. We're ready. She finally calls the case, and there's me, my client, another defendant, her attorney, and then the prosecutor, the social worker, the case manager. And this judge walks into the courtroom, this magistrate. She never looked up. She never looked my client, the other defendant. She never looked at them in the eye. She never made eye contact with them. And I think it was maybe Jim who was talking about treating his, or Finn. Finn was talking about treating the students made in the image of God. Made in the image of God. Do you think when God made you, he never looked you in the eye? Do you think when God was creating you in your mother's womb that he was doing this? No, I don't think so. I think when God creates us in his image, he is all in. All in. But this is the system we have. We don't have time to even look someone in the eye before you say, I am removing your children from your home. And what it felt like for me was that I was, do you remember those little round Band-Aids that come in every box? And how many of you used them? I never used them. What do you do with them? They're kind of like useless to me, right? But I felt like what I was doing, as much as I thought it was worthwhile, as much as I thought it was important, I was putting those little round Band-Aids on people who were bleeding out in front of me. And I was putting these little Band-Aids on people and a system that was bleeding out. The system is it is overworked. But for these people, it was so hard to watch them because I would see them come back every month. And I thought, God, this is great. I love what I'm doing, and I will continue to do it. But I think there's something more. What is the something more? What is the something more that you have for me that I can do with my law degree? And the next thing that he asked me to do was hard because it did not require a law degree. It was really hard. It's kind of hard to put aside that degree, you know, the little piece of paper. The final crisis point for me came when I was doing a continuing legal education as a guardian ad litem. We're required to do extra hours every year. And the course subject was drug and alcohol abuse, psychiatric problems or psychological problems, and gender dysphoria. And the guardian ad litem is appointed by the court to serve the best interests of the child. You as the GAL, you make a recommendation to the court. So we had all these case studies, and then the case study came on gender dysphoria. And this was the setup for the case study. Mother and father are fighting for custody of their 15-year-old son. The 15-year-old son is at the father's one day, and the father discovers that the 15-year-old son is looking at homosexual pornography on his computer. And the father has a fit, gets upset. You as the guardian ad litem now. Father thinks that homosexuality is an unacceptable lifestyle. Mother thinks it's okay. You are the guardian ad litem. You have to make a recommendation to the court. What do you think a good guardian ad litem should do? 150 people in this court, in this seminar that we had. 150. And we're all on our little tables. Hands down, 149 to 1. Who do you think got custody? The mother. Now, that would have, I said, well, the paperwork describes the dad as, I think it was, a evangelical religious zealot. I said, well, what, that's a conclusion. Tell me what the facts are that demonstrate zealot. Well, it doesn't matter, because he's not going to want his son to choose a homosexual lifestyle. And you, as the guardian ad litem for the child, you make the decision what is in the best interest of the child. So, if the mom was like really into Wicca, would that change the fact pattern? I don't know. But maybe anything's better than an evangelical zealot. I don't know. But then somebody said there was an American Bar Association rule, which, as part of our professional code, an attorney cannot engage in conduct that the lawyer knows or reasonably should know is harassment, discrimination on the basis of race, sex, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, in conduct related to the practice of law. This paragraph does not limit the ability of a lawyer to accept, decline, or withdraw from a representation in accordance with Rule 1.16. And that shocked me. That shocked me, because I thought, you mean that I could be in violation of the Code of Professional Conduct if I open my mouth as a GAL and say, maybe not. Maybe this isn't in the best interest of the child. And that really was like a watershed moment for me, because then I realized that if the rules, the laws, are the boundaries for us to exist in a society, what boundaries do we have left when I cannot even say as a professional what I think? Even here, in this challenging and difficult but rewarding area of the legal practice, the law was not just changing and I had to run to catch up. I could not even think the way, I didn't have the liberty to think the way that I wanted to think. So, lest I paint a bleak picture, there are plenty of good things going on in the law. I couldn't name one for you right now. But I do know that there are also many great attorneys and many great attorneys who are believers, who are working in these areas. And I applaud that. But I knew that God had something more for me. So I was 61 at the time, and I thought, I've got maybe 6 or 7 years left to work. So I asked, okay, Lord, how can I go beyond impacting individuals and families and actually touch cultures? Because we are called to be culture changers. We are called to be change agents wherever we're living. And I wanted to do that. And I thought, okay, if I'm supposed to usher in the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven, what I was seeing was not heaven. It was like a cosmic spiritual battlefield, in fact. So there had to be a way that I could impact culture at the root level. How does one do that? You do what God did in Genesis 1. And you draw a line. You draw a line, and like it says in Job 38:11, you can go this far and no further. What is your line? What is your line? We have got to figure out, as the people of God, what is our line, and we draw it in the sand and we say, no further. Because if we do not establish the boundaries, we are a bunch of amoebas, spiritual amoebas, social amoeba, cultural amoebas with no form. No form. And what is formless? The earth before God spoke. I said, okay, God, I will take whatever assignment you give me. And he brought me back to Heartbeat International, which works with pregnancy help centers. It's where I had worked as an attorney, And now I was going to go back as the international program specialist. I want to give a shout out to Kareem. Kareem, I just want to affirm what you do and what Human Coalition does. And this was not what I had prepared, but I do want to say this because I see, you know, African American brothers and sisters here. I see Caucasian African. When I look in the mirror, I see an Asian sister. So praise the Lord. Here's the thing. I'm going to throw out some statistics to you, and please forgive me. I'm going to run these out past you, okay? 12% of the US population is black, and yet somewhere between 28 and 36% of all abortions are performed on black babies. In the city of New York, there are more black abortions than there are live births. The Guttmacher Institute, which is the research arm of Planned Parenthood, so maybe we can even count on their statistics, I don't know, says that it's 28%. Among black women, the current abortion rate is 391 out of every 1,000. 391 out of every 1,000. That means that in 2014, 2.7% of black women aged 15 to 44 had an abortion. By comparison, only 0.75% of white women had an abortion. In 2016, there are approximately 2,600 abortions happening every day. Every day. So, what do? I work with international centers in about 64, 65 countries. Heartbeat International has about 1,100, 1,150 affiliates around the world. And what we do is we encourage the establishment of pregnancy help centers and life-affirming maternity homes, because I will tell you, there is not a country in the world where abortions are not happening. They may not be legal, but believe me, they're happening. Chemical abortions, RU486, across the world. Across the world. In America, you can get it on Amazon. Delivered to your door, probably. You know what Mother Teresa said? In her classic, profound simplicity, any country that accepts abortion is not teaching its people to love, but to use violence to get what they want. That is why the greatest destroyer of love and peace is abortion. When we talk about the sanctity of life, the intrinsic value of life, it extends into every area in which the image of God is desecrated. And that is not just abortion. It is pornography. It is child abuse. It is domestic abuse. It is sexual trafficking. It is slavery. Those are all examples of the desecration of the image of our God on a human being's face. Where there is no intrinsic value to human life, sin abounds. And the root sin is the way in which we have arrogated to ourselves the right to place a minimal value on a human being. The world is formless and dark and void because there are no longer the laws and the boundaries which tell us what is right and what is wrong. The law says that abortion is a right. Gender selection is a right. It's all fluid, and where everything is fluid, you know what happens? Every man does what is right in his own eyes. So, my role is to reclaim the boundary lines in my culture. And so I ask you again, well, my take-homes for you. The first one is, it's my favorite line from a Shakespeare play, Henry VI. First thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. No, I am pro-life, so I can't say that. My first real take-home is to ask yourself and to write down, what is your line? What is your boundary line? And draw it with a thick black Sharpie across the ground. And you say, you know what? This far and no more. What is your boundary line? And the second one, remember the prayer of Jabez? Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory, expand my boundaries. Let your hand be with me and keep me from the evil one. I challenge you, my brothers and sisters, in this Church of Cleveland, which I love, find your boundary and then keep expanding the kingdom 1 inch at a time. Thank you very much.